Welcome to Scattered, the podcast that's all over the map in the best way possible. From pro wrestling to pop culture, from mental health to the Buffalo Bills, and everything in between. If it's interesting, we're talking about it. And now, here's your host, the king of variety, the master of ADD, and the guy who proves being all over the place can be awesome, Brian Fink.
Welcome. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Scattered. I am your host with the most random thoughts and the most random openings because I can't figure out which catchphrase I want to go with. Although I still like that A to Z and back to C thing that we talked about at one point. But I am your host with the most randomness and the most ADD, according to the opening, Brian Fink. Thank you for joining me on this episode. This is a bit of a different episode. This is not going to be as heavy on the mental health area. I mean, I'm gonna touch on some mental health things. I'm gonna talk a little bit about it, but the overarching thing, as I promised, this is kind of a variety show. So the overarching theme on this is going to be my favorite video game of all time. And for anyone who's listening who knows me, you know the answer already. It's Final Fantasy VII. There is no game in the history of video games that comes close. There is nothing that comes close. I have loved Final Fantasy VII since the first time I saw it. 5th grade, I was over at a friend's house. His mom would take us to school in the mornings. And she had rented Final Fantasy VII from the local video store because kids, believe it or not, there used to be a time where you had to go to a store and you could rent or borrow a game or a movie for a weekend. There were things called Blockbuster, or where we grew up, Palmer Video. So my friend rented Final Fantasy VII from Palmer Video, and I went to his house to catch a ride to school, and I remember seeing him playing it. And I thought, this is kind of weird. It's not what I expected. I had grown up a Nintendo guy who had played Mario. My brother had the original NES when I was a little kid. And then we had the Super Nintendo. We had the Sega Genesis. We had all the systems. But games were usually side-scrolling beat-em-ups or tournament fighters or racing games. To see how much, first of all, how much reading was involved was crazy. But it was just this little sample size that I saw of the game and the characters and the relationship between Aerith and Cloud. And I was completely sucked in. So for my 11th birthday, my parents got me Final Fantasy VII. And man, it changed my life. I played that game until the rubber came off the controller. I was so enthralled with the story, with the characters. I mean, Cloud, for anyone who is listening to this, if you haven't played the game, it's over 30 years old almost. So, spoiler alert, the problems that Cloud had psychologically were something that I could relate to. Now, I never had an identity crisis or anything like that, but just the fact that there was a character with so much depth and, mental health issues, it was crazy to me. His relationship with Tifa and Aerith, I mean, who wouldn't, what 11-year-old boy wouldn't want two beautiful girls fighting over him, or at least perceived it that way? I know for sure I did. The music was absolutely stunning. It was unbelievable. I had never heard music in a video game that was that good. The characters decisions, the choices that you could make while playing the game that affected different things. Not to mention the fact that you could change the characters' names. So Tifa and Aerith were not fighting over Cloud Strife. They were fighting over Brian. No big deal, you know. It was absolutely crazy. And in 1997, I had never, ever seen anything like it. I was used to Turtles in Time, you know, or Streets of Rage, my side-scrolling beat-em-ups, or Sonic the Hedgehog, which I kind of sucked at, even though my younger brother was amazing at it and still is to this day. He's good at all the Sonic games. I could never play the Sonic games. But I think about that game when I turned 11, and I think about my daughter, who just this past week turned 11. And she's not really a gamer, not much. She'll talk like she is sometimes, I think, because she wants to feel kind of a connection to me or to some of her friends who play games. But the only thing I really see her play is Roblox, and she loves it. But comparing Roblox to Final Fantasy VII is like comparing Tommy Wiseau's The Room to Citizen Kane. The Room's going to win every time. Okay, I'll see myself out. Sorry about that. But as I said before, we grew up, my family, we had all the systems. My older brother, he had the original Nintendo, so playing Mario 3, Mario 2, Knight Rider, which was his favorite show of all time, and they had a pretty corny video game for it. But I played all those Nintendo games. And as I got older, we got Sega Genesis for Christmas in 1992. And there's a video somewhere, I hope I still have it, my parents recorded of my younger brother completely flipping out. I mean, so excited. My older brother and I, we had asked Santa for proton packs from Ghostbusters, and we ended up with a Sega Genesis, so kind of a lateral move, I guess. It was still cool, but my younger brother was absolutely ecstatic. He was up until he dropped a razor blade into the Sega Genesis because he wanted to see what would happen. Yeah, we were a weird family, what can I tell you? But from there, we ended up with a Super Nintendo. And to this day, Final Fantasy VII might be my favorite game of all time, but the Super Nintendo is definitely my favorite system of all time. Turtles in Time, I already mentioned that, how much I loved that game. Playing Mortal Kombat and Mortal Kombat 2 on there. Street Fighter 2. F-Zero, which I'm not even a big racing guy. Top Gear. Again, I'm not a big racer guy. But man, those games were so cool. And that same friend who introduced me to Final Fantasy VII, we would go to his house, we would play games, and anytime he was going to lose, he'd unplug the controller. So if he's listening by any chance and he knows who he is, dude, you never gave us a fair shake, you cheated. But like I said, going back to Final Fantasy VII, it was so much different than any of those games. So much different than anything I had ever seen. And I've played the game throughout the years probably 100 times. I've given more money to Square Enix on Final Fantasy VII properties than anyone I know. It's an obsession. If it's on a mug, I'll buy the mug. If there is a poster right now, God bless my wife, there is a poster that is in the same impression as a Van Gogh, and it's Cloud standing in front of the Shinra building, and that is right over my bed. So I sleep with Cloud looking down on me every night. I wanted Tifa and Aerith, I ended up with Cloud, but it's 2024, I'm not going to complain. Anywho, I loved the game, if I haven't made that clear. And as I got older, I got less and less into video games. I started having some bad habits, started hanging out with the wrong crowd, became more into bad behaviors, some drug use, some stealing, actually a lot of stealing. I'll go into that more in a different episode. But I made a lot of bad choices, especially as a teenager, as my mental health really started to deteriorate. As my bipolar started to kick in, I had a much harder time focusing on video games became less and less a priority, and finding really unhealthy escapes became more the priority for me. I would get into fights. I would lie, cheat, steal. There you go, Eddie Guerrero, R.I.P. I lie, I cheat, I steal. Okay, I keep telling you guys I'm not going to sing anymore, and I break into songs, so sorry. But I kind of fell out of gaming. I would play here and there, mainly WWE games or Madden, NFL games. Sometimes I would still play some of the tournament fighters like Tekken. I became a really big Tekken fan. Street Fighter became a little bit too complicated for me. The games as a whole just became much more complicated. But what I would do a lot of the time was I would go back and I would play Final Fantasy VII, because the story was my comfort food. The characters became my friends in a time where I was always blessed that I had friends, but I never felt like I had really strong friendships. And a lot of that was my own psyche. But I could always rely on Cloud. I could always rely on Barrett. I could always rely on Tifa and Aerith. When I felt like I could never find love, I had them to fall back on. So even in my darkest of times, I would go back and I would play that game and I'd find solace. But gaming as a whole just kind of took a back burner. As I got older, though, I started to grow out of some of those bad behaviors we talked about. I started to really begin to find myself. But gaming hadn't really found its way back to me. And part of that was because gaming had just become so incredibly complex. The simplicities of the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo games versus trying to play Call of Duty or trying to play Uncharted or God of War just seemed so hard to me. I already had horrible hand-eye coordination. So trying to play these games just became something that I didn't even bother trying. That was until E3 of 2015, when a trailer dropped for the Final Fantasy VII remake, and my jaw hit the floor. I could not believe it. I was absolutely blown away by the idea of it. And my first thought was, well, crap. I don't know how to play modern games, so there's no way in hell I'll be able to do this. So, kind of like a life lesson here, and it sounds silly, but it's true. If you want to get good at something, you practice. So, I started playing some of those games I mentioned. I started playing God of War. I got really big into the Batman Arkham games, which are fantastic, by the way. I could talk about those for hours, as those and the Insomniac Spider-Man games are, without question, the absolute best superhero video games of all time. And I can go on, we can have a whole episode and a whole discussion about those. But I started playing these games and I realized, maybe I don't suck as bad as I thought I do. Or maybe easy mode had just gotten really easy for people who sucked at video games. But I began training, and I kind of had this sense, even back in 2015, that it was going to take a while for this game to come out. So I dubbed my return to video games as training for the 2020 games, like I was an Olympian or something. One of the great things I discovered, though, as I was doing this was, while I had moved on from problems like drug use or stealing or things of that nature, I still struggled with mental health concerns, and I still do to this day. I think a lot of us do. But playing these video games became very therapeutic. If I was stressed out, if I was feeling really depressed, I could play these games. I could start playing Kingdom Hearts. I could start playing God of War. I could start playing the Yakuza games, which I highly recommend. especially Judgment and Lost Judgment, which, by the way, are probably my favorite Yakuza games and two of my favorite games for the PS4, PS5 as a whole. Those stories are absolutely unbelievable also. But I found there was a lot of therapy in playing these games. And by the time Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1 came out in 2020, I was ready. I was so ready. And my younger brother and I, we camped out in the basement that weekend. I got a surround sound system. I got a new TV. I got a PS4 Pro. We were ready to rock and roll, man. And I have to tell you guys, for the first 10% of the original game, which is all that this game covers, it was absolutely amazing. Sure, I would have loved for it to have gone outside of Midgar and covered more than the first 10%, but man, oh man, seeing my favorite childhood characters come to life, hearing the music in high def as it was reorchestrated, the graphics, hearing the voices of these characters I had grown up imagining what they sounded like, and to hear them all sound almost identical to how I pictured it was absolutely amazing. My brother and I, we played the entire weekend. It was great. We ended up beating the game, and I played it over and over and over again in anticipation of the second part, which came out this past February, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And that also was absolutely breathtaking. They went way, way above and beyond any of my expectations. The way they brought the characters, the extra characters to life, the way they expanded all of the surprises and twists and turns in the story, the way they had so much added bonus content, it was completely beyond my wildest dreams. And I sit here now in anticipation of the third and final part, which will probably be another couple of years before it comes out. So I'm sure we'll talk about it a lot as we build up to it and wait for it. But Final Fantasy VII, video games as a whole, have played such a part of my life. Final Fantasy VII, though, was more than a hobby to me. It was a way to connect. It was a way to heal. It was a way to find joy. So, guys, I could go on and on and on about FF7. I can go on and on about the characters, the story, and we can go into a deep dive if that's something you guys want to do. But what I'm encouraging you to do is find things that you're passionate about. Find things that you're excited about. Find things that bring you joy. Your hobbies are who you are, man. We work, and some of us are blessed to be able to work and do things that we really love. But some of us need those escapes. I have a buddy who is a brilliant musician. I mean, he plays guitar and understands how to put harmonies and music together. And I have no idea what he's talking about, but he's so damn passionate about it. He doesn't do it for a living, but man, he takes so much time to do it because he has such a passion for it, and it brings him joy. I have another friend who loves to bake. She can bake, she can cook, she's excellent at all of it. And she does it because she finds it soothing. She finds it therapeutic. When she's stressed out, she can bake something or she can cook something, and it brings her joy. So guys, find your joy. Find a hobby. Find your passion. Find something that helps take that edge off. Embrace what gives you that comfort, no matter how small it is. Again, I'm a video game guy. I'm a wrestling guy. My friend is a baker. My other friend is a musician. We're scattered. We're all over the place. So I'm telling you, You could stay scattered, but let's connect. Let's stay connected to something. And I would love to hear from you guys in the comments. What do you do to unwind? What are your passions? What's something that brings you a lot of joy? Because as Barrett would say from Final Fantasy VII, there ain't no getting off this train, guys. It's only going to go where the tracks take us. But I challenge you to decide and build your own tracks and figure out where that train is going to take you. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk again soon.